Welcome back. It's time to create a sign-in form and maybe even a registration form because for new users, you want to register them. So let's work on that. We first want to perhaps create a sign-in and a registration component. So let's do that. I'm going to create a new folder, call it sign-in, and this folder will have a new file called signin.js. And again, using our best friend copy and paste, we can use that and call this sign in. And we don't have any CSS for it. And no props yet. Within here, we definitely want to have a sign-in form. And luckily for us, because we're using tachyons, well, if we search tachyons form, they should have, it looks like they have a sign-in form just for us that we can use. All right, this looks awesome. We can just copy and paste this code. And again, because we have tachyons, the classes will be automatically applied. So let's do that. Fix the indentation a bit. Let's save. And you see here that the syntax is wrong. Well, that's because with JSX, we could have gotten away in let me make this smaller. In HTML, we didn't necessarily have to close the input boxes. But here with JSX, we have to make sure that the input tags are closed off. So now in our case, we have 3 inputs, I believe. So we can save that. And there's still something off. Let's see what else we had. And we have one more input in here. All right, you see the highlighting is fixed. Let's just make sure this works by adding the sign-in component to our app.js. And then finally, we can just put it at the top for now to make sure that it works. Let's see what happens. It's compiled successfully. Going back and, all right, we got the form. It doesn't look too bad, but there are definitely a few things off. We don't want this bottom stuff and we need everything centered. Well, one thing I want this to kind of have a card underneath it. So if I go back to tachyons and I do tachyons cards, let's look at product card. All right, I like the look of this product card, but I just like the boundaries of it. I don't need to copy the contents. So I'm going to just copy this article tag and add it in here. Close off the article tag. And let's see how that looks. All right, we got the boundary box at least, but everything's kind of pushed off. Again, we're going to start removing some things that we don't need. We don't need the forgot your password. We don't need the remember me. Let's save. Go back to that. And again, we want to make sure that this is centered. And we actually want to change the classes here to, again, I did Command Control G to have all these multiple cursors, and I'll just say class name. And we actually want to remove this center over here. We already have it up here. All right, things are starting to look a little bit better. I want to make a bit of a shadow around the border. So again, maybe change the border radius to 3. I'm going to change some of these values. I'm going to add my favorite shadow. And I don't think I need this. Let's see how that looks. All right, that's better. Look at that border. That's looking very nice. And maybe we just want this a little bit bigger, and this should say register instead of sign up because, well, we want to ideally have another form for registering. So we'll say register here. And then for sign in, we'll say F1. Save that, go back. All right, that doesn't look too bad actually. And if I type things here, everything looks good. Perfect, so we have the sign-in form. This sign-in form, well, we don't want it to show this when this app is active. Ideally, we have a sign-in form, and once the user signs in, then they're able to access the homepage. So let's do that. It sounds like we need a bit of state. If I go to app.js, and this is a problem that is very common in apps, and there are libraries that you can use, but for us, I want to build this from scratch just so we have a better understanding of how things work. We can create a route state, and the route keeps track of where we are on the page. In our case, we want it to start on sign-in. So when the app initially loads and the constructor gets run, sign-in or route should be sign-in. So now that we have this sign-in, well, it sounds like a conditional statement, right? We can just say that if, and I can't do an if statement here because we're inside of a return statement. But because this is just JSX, we can wrap things in curly brackets. And now it's a JavaScript expression. So we'll wrap this in curly brackets, and we want the navigation there no matter what. If this.state.route equals sign-in, if that's true, then I want you to return the sign-in component. Otherwise, you can return the logo component. And let's just change the spacing here just so it looks a little bit better. Let's save and see if that works. There you go, I've added that. We see that we get an error here saying, well, JSON Ajax elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. Remember, because we're returning multiple elements here, that doesn't work. We need to wrap them. Yeah, that error message is a little bit tricky, but you'll get used to it after a while. So we want to wrap this in a div. Let's save. Let's go back. All right, let's look at the console. No errors, but it's still showing sign-in. So let's check to make sure that we did this right. If this.state.route equals sign-in, and as you can see, I've spelled that wrong, and that's why it wasn't working. If I save, there you go. We get our sign-in. And if I change this to something else, well, in that case, we get our home screen. Amazing. Just simple conditionals in JavaScript, and we have ourselves a route. Let's expand on this. Let's do sign in. And now, if the user signs in, well, we want to direct them to the homepage. So let's create a function on sign in. And this prop will have, we'll call it on route change. So when route changes, it's going to be this dot on route change, and let's write that function. We can say on route change using arrow functions. And let's think about this. For now, we can just say this dot set state to home. Doesn't mean much, but it changes the sign-in route to home. So let's get that working. I'm going to save. Oh, I'm going to wrap this in curly brackets because it's an object, yeah. And now if we go into the sign-in component, we can say, for this input, we can just have an onClick event handler. So let me add this on a new space just so you can see it better. make this bigger a bit. There you go. We'll do an on-click. And on-click, this sign in will receive the on route change event handler, and we'll just say on route change. We'll save. Let's go back. I'm going to click sign in, and it's working. All right, we also want to click on sign out, and it should take us to the sign in page. So again, we have the route change, but this time on the click of the sign out, which is the navigation over here, we want it to go to route. So how can we do that? Well, let's go to the navigation component, and we want to say on the p tag that there's going to be an on-click, and the on-click event, which we haven't written yet, but we do have the on route change. So based on that, I can pass that in as a prop. And going back to app.js, we can pass in to navigation on route change, this dot on route change. But there's an issue here, because once I sign in and I click sign out, well, nothing happens. We're never changing the route to sign in. Ideally, when we click, we change the route to sign in so that this statement over here evaluates to true and we get the sign in form. So it sounds like instead of us just statically entering home to on route change, we need to dynamically say that our route is going to be what we give it. We need to change the on route change in sign in and on route change in navigation. So let's go to sign in first and say that on route change, home. Now, we don't want to actually run this function. The way we have it now is that we're going to run this function when it gets rendered, but that's not what we want. We want it to run whenever onClick happens, and then onClick will call this function. So the way we do that is we can do an arrow function. And this arrow function will just have an on route change home. So it's just a function that's going to get called. Here we're just defining the function. Let's do the same thing in navigation as well. In navigation, on route change, we'll now pass a parameter, but instead of home, it'll say sign in. Let's see if that works. I'm going to sign in and sign out. Sign in and sign out. Awesome. We're not going to worry too much about getting an error because we haven't entered anything. For now, we just want to make sure that the routes work. All right, let's also build out the register. For a new user, we want them to have a register. Maybe it's also asked for the name of the user. And just to keep things simple, we will just add a new folder in components. And this is going to be register. And this is going to be very similar to sign in. So we'll have a bit of a code duplication, but again, we're just building it fairly fast, so it should be fine for now. So copying this from sign in, we can just copy everything from sign in, go to register, and now change the sign in to register. And the register, maybe we'll add another field. Maybe that field will have at the top just the name. And we'll say for name, type text, then name will be just name, ID, we'll just say name. We actually don't need these properties, it just came with the form that I copy and pasted from Tachyons. But it does the job for now, it should be good. And we don't need the register link at the bottom. Let's save. And if we go back to the sign in, we also don't really want this to be an anchor tag. We want to do a route change. So we can just maybe do a p tag. And this p tag will have the onClick event as well. And on click, it will say that from sign in, we want to go to register. Perfect. And then finally, if we go to app.js, we want to import this component. Register and register. And register is defined but never used because we need to add it to our render. Now, this is a little bit tricky because we kind of have to do a few more conditional checks. We'll move this a little bit around just to have cleaner code. I'm going to say if state.route is home, in that case, I want you to render our home screen. And otherwise, I'm going to have another expression, so I'm wrapping it in curly brackets. And this other expression will have another ternary that will say this.state.route equals sign in. If it's sign in, then we'll return the sign in form. Otherwise, we will return the register form. And I know there's better ways to do it. We could have just pulled this out over here or done it in the return statement. But for now, we just want this to get working so we can test it out. We have sign in. If I click register, I'll go to register, but we need to change the title so we can actually see that. So let's do that one more time. Let's go back to register and we'll change the title to register. And let's go back. We're on sign in. If I click register, I go to register. And if I click sign in, I'm finally in. And let's finally also change the input type submit or the value to register. Let's save that again. Go back, register, clicks on register. I don't know if you also noticed that we're not getting the cursor when we click on register, so let's fix that. We'll go to sign in and we'll say that on this p tag, we'll say that it's a pointer class. There you go. Whew. All right, so we're getting our form, which is good. The last thing that I want to fix is the sign out. I want to be able to have sign out only when I'm at home. And maybe when I'm on the sign in or register, I have the two navigation tabs over here. That's fairly easy to do. We can go back to navigation. And in navigation, we can say that if is signed in, a variable that we don't have yet, but we can create one. I just want you to think about how we want to design this. So if is signed in the user, in that case, we want to display this, right? Otherwise, we can display, and I'm showing you how to do this without the ternary, the way that we did it in the app.js. I just want to show you both ways. If the user isn't signed in, then perhaps we should have two navigations. One that says sign in, and another one that says register. And over here, I see that I'm returning this entire thing instead of what I should have been doing is returning the individual. So here I'll say return wrap this in a bracket. And we have the first return, and then if is signed in, then we'll do return. Let's save that. Ooh, I made another mistake here. We don't need the two nav things. We actually just want the middle p tag. And here, just add the two links. So the sign in and register. So we can remove this because it was giving me an error because I was returning more than one thing. All right, looks good. We want to make sure that the on route change, if we click on sign in, it'll go to home. If we click on register, again, it will also go to home. If I click sign out, it'll go to sign in. And then finally, is signed in doesn't exist yet. So it looks like we need to add a new state. And we'll call this one is signed in. And to start off, it's going to be false. And this is something that we can easily do in the on route change. On route change, we can perhaps add another if statement, and we'll say if route equals sign out. So if we're trying to sign out, well then we should set state of is signed in to false because we're signing out. Else if route equals home, well in that case we want to set state of is signed in to true. And you might be thinking, do we want to not authenticate and make sure that they have access to getting home? And that's something that we're not going to worry about for now. We just want to get it working. So if the route is signed out, then is signed in will be false. If the route is home, then, well, they're obviously signed in. So it's going to be true. And no matter what, we still want to change the route. Let's see if this actually works. I go back, I click on register. Oop, I'm going to home instead of going to the register page. So I made a mistake here. If I go into navigation, obviously if I click on register, we want to go to register. And if I click on sign in, we want to go to sign in. Let's save that. Let's try that again. Sign in, nothing happens because we're already here. Register, nice. Sign in, register, perfect. If I click on register here, I go to register. If I click register, I'm at home. And we see that we need this to change to sign out. And that is on the home page. So we can go back to app.js. And it's a simple fix. We can go back here. We want to actually pass the prop here of is signed in to be this dot state dot sign in. Oh, that's not it. Is signed in. Let's save. So if we go back here, we see that it's not working. And that's because, again, this is why it's so tricky with JavaScript. I made false into a string. So when it checks is signed in over here, false technically is true in JavaScript because it's a string, so it exists. If I go to here and I do Boolean false, it'll say that it's true. So let's go back to that. I'm going to say is signed in. This should be false, a Boolean. So now let's see if that works. It's going to register. If I click register, it's home. If I click sign out, I am signing out. But see how this isn't changed? Because I made another mistake here. When we click sign out, over here, we ideally want to go and say sign out. And when we sign out, we sign out properly. All right, we got ourselves a nice working app. There's a few cleanup materials that we can do here, such as removing the console. We're also using this.state a lot when we can use destructuring. So I can just have is signed in, image URL, route, and box destructured. So now I can make things a little bit cleaner by removing this.state everywhere. There you go. Oh, and I have to add const here. All right, perfect. This looks pretty good. On button submit, on input change, everything is looking nice. We have our calculate face location. There's obviously a few things that we can improve upon, but for now we have a working app that does exactly what we need to. It does face recognition and it works nicely. I also want to see the console, make sure that we don't get any errors. And we see that we have two things here. One is invalid DOM property 4. Did you mean HTML4? It gives us a nice error that says add signin.js. And that is because, again, we're using JSX and 4 is a JavaScript word. So even though in HTML you can use 4 for labels to attach them to input, in JSX we have to do HTML4. So we can do HTML4, HTML4, save that, and we'll have to do that in the register as well. And that works. But when I click sign in, I get the form submission canceled because the form is not connected. And that is because with HTML, remember when we worked on forms, it automatically, if there is an input or a button, when there's an on submit event where there's type submit, it will automatically try and send those forms. If I actually change this to a div, and I save that, if we go back to register and I click register, I don't get that error anymore. Again, because in future videos when we create the backend, we won't be necessarily sending a form. We're going to be sending it through JSON, which is more dynamic. We can customize things a little bit better. We can just not worry about HTML forms so that we have full customization with JSON. So we can do the same here as well. And again, signing in, no errors, everything works as intended. If the form part was confusing, make sure you check out the HTTP, JSON, and AJAX section. Like I said before, forms automatically submit or try to submit things. For us, we're not submitting anything yet. We're going to create our own server where we're going to be able to sign in our own users and register our own new users. There's a few things that we can clean up and we don't need to worry about because we have a working app. And now I want to start diving into creating a server so that we can actually sign in people and sign out and have a server that this website interacts with. I'll see you in that one. Bye-bye.